DFS Fridays here on the channel, and we're actually switching the show order this week. JM's traveling, so we're going to buy him a little bit extra time. So we're going to kick off with Bully the Sims and Youdacao, walking through some input volatility, his favorite games, favorite contrarian stacks, and then we'll pick out some lineups over on Run the Sims. And then, of course, JM from 1 Week Season will be joining us to give his thoughts on this Week 12 slate. I'm Pete Overzet. Let's get into the Bully the Sims with Youda. All right, Youda, I almost said you shouldn't come on the show this week because you failed to win $1 million last week. You only got second place to Shady Advice is what I'm seeing here.
Yeah, it's terrible run bad. I myself couldn't believe this is happening again, but we'll try again. Hopefully I'll try to pick up the pieces.
Yeah, I heard I'll pull up the lineup here because I heard Shady talking about this, or maybe it was Sacrilegious was relaying a Shady story where he said, you know what, it'd be really cool if Mark Andrews scored a touchdown and then he had that like tush push run that goes for 34 yards, and I assume that's what did you in.
I mean, that sounds like a really good sweat. I wasn't aware that I could lose to that, so I wish I was there. But to be fair, this team that I had to get up there, I think it was fortunate to get up there, so I felt nothing over getting second in this spot because I didn't even think I should have had first for those like 15 minutes that I did. This lineup in particular, it was my only McMillan lineup in this. So just based on that, given like all the landmines in the early, I thought it was fine to just like jam the most simple chalk type stuff. I'll take the play that I like with Worthy as a one-off, which I mentioned here. But really, like if you look at all the lineups, everyone's going to have the snowflake from this past week. So,
yeah, for the audio listeners, the full lineup we have on screen here, second place for 200K. It is the Jacoby Brissett to Michael Wilson and Trey McBride with the CMC bringback. You saw that all over the leaderboards. Mentions the Tetaroya play there at 3.6%, 36 points there. Woody Marks, Chase Brown, but able to survive just because of that massive McMillan score there. So yeah, Worthy is the guy that dogged you here.
I specifically said they were going to look deep ball. It was in like the first 15 plays, so it was designed. Mahomes just doesn't have it. I don't know. I saw the play. It was like Worthy probably had a man beat by like 2-3 yards. Mahomes probably led him like 2 yards further. But he connects on that play probably last year with what they had going.
Yeah, but that McMillan play at 3.6%, obviously hitting the upper end of his range there with 36 points, but that was a nice call there. And I know you've been on kind of like getting on the Bryce and Tet stuff in the right spots this year.
Yeah, I mean, I've been higher in general. I wasn't as high this week just because like brutal matchup, and I thought it was like a slow game. So actually just fortunate to have him here. But I guess anytime you're going to get that level of talent at 5.6 unowned, really good. I don't think anyone would have had him at this 3.6. So yeah, I'm just super high on like him coming in. I think he's the best receiver of this class by far.
In this, like in a contest like this, how many of your lineups are you adjusting after the 1 p.m. slate versus letting it ride?
I wouldn't be able to tell you exactly since I do a lot of it wholesale. If I know that it's like a particularly high equity team, I'll look at it much closer and it'll just be like until the buzzer. But for this, I'm almost certain that I swapped onto it. And it's likely that more than half of my entries are swapped in here.
Yeah, because you get early, middling scores from Brown and Marks, but just that huge score from Tetaroya, and it's like, okay, I can now play the chalk stack, basically.
Right, because you're looking around at like PMR and like the scores out there, and they're all pretty low as far as teams that didn't have guys left.
Yeah, I guess like Bijan was maybe the one guy early who had a big score.
That's right.
That you wouldn't have had.
And so you can, if you don't have Bijan, you definitely need McCaffrey late. He's the only guy that can match it. and very few Bijan are going to have McCaffrey.
Yep. Yeah, that makes sense. How many lineups did you have in this contest this week?
I think that's 19. That's the last entry I have.
Okay.
So
all right.
So if I use the shady portfolio tool better, maybe I come up on top here.
Wow. Well, there you go. Shady using his own tool here. He had the Brissett. He takes the 6-pointer from Jamar Chase, but he has the CMC, Bijan, Michael Wilson, Trey McBride quartet, who all drop 30+ points.
Yeah, I guess I said no one's going to have that, but there you go. That's the winner.
That's the winner there.
You don't necessarily need the McMillan as long as you have, like, because Wilson's a lock to be up here. But like, once again, like, I don't think I should have been up there. I knew the Greg Dortch garbage wasn't good for me. But I'm only up here because of the McCaffrey run out the clock, garbage time run. Myself, so.
Incredible. All right, let's dig in here to week 12. I do think we have a ton of input volatility this week, mainly at the running back position. One I want to get your opinion on right away. And I'll tell you, I know you don't do the underdog drafts, but Trevion Henderson has an ADP of like 6 or 7. He's like a first-round pick. He's going ahead of Derrick Henry. And then you look at projections, everyone has him way, way lower than that. So I feel like this is a spot people are very interested in. Can you put the genie back in the bottle with Trevion Henderson, or is Ramondre going to be a big issue for him?
I think he's just won the job outright, like 60-40, 65-35 at minimum. So like, I'm okay with the numbers we have there. It should probably be skewed a little more, because what more would you want Trevion to do?
Right. I think are you working under the assumption Ramondre will get all the goal line carries, or do you think that's up for debate?
He should. It's not necessarily. I mean, it's not like he's going to get all of them. But I think that Ramondre should be more in that role that Terrell Jennings was in. He obviously has the capacity for a bit more, but I think any carry or pass play you're not calling for Henderson is a disservice after what we've seen.
Yeah. So like, assuming I'm looking at early ownership here, I'm not seeing a ton of ownership on him at 6,700. You guys got it at 3%, so pretty low. So is that actually enticing to you at that ownership?
Yes. As far as like just like a ridiculous onslaught, not even an onslaught, just like a very heavy game stack. Since we have Burrow back, you kind of have greater upside as far as Cincinnati making it a back and forth. And we know what the Cincinnati defense is.
Yep. I should mention today, there was some like reverting course on the Burrow bullishness after yesterday, the way I guess Flacco was taking all the reps today and Burrow was off by himself. So that's something we have to monitor. For you, how big of a difference is it for just that overall game environment, Flacco versus Burrow?
Pretty big, because Flacco, we're getting that like backup QB, like 4th or 5th game production regression. It's like the book is very much clear on like how he operates and what they'll do with him. And so you'll see him throw 40 times now, but just the efficiency is gone. It's like 6 yards per attempt, something like that.
With Chase out of the lineup, do you have any favorites of the non-T. Higgins pass catchers, or is this just Chase Brown and T. Higgins for you?
I think just with how much you're removing, it's got to help everyone to like a pretty large extent. Even like Tanner Hudson, Noah Fant, like Yoshivas, not really much of a talent, but like him just being on the field, 6 Joe Burrow targets, whatever, is pretty valuable. Like Higgins, we haven't really seen too much in this exact scenario. So I don't know like how it plays out as far as like how much of a target share he can demand, since he doesn't really operate in the exact same areas of the field as Chase, nor is he really capable of doing those same things. He's more of like a sideline type, like strong hands, jump ball. rather than like possession, short to intermediate design touches. So I don't really know, like that role is just such a monstrous role that it's like it could be like Chase Brown filling in. Like I would guess more Noah Fant, maybe to a greater extent than like Yoshivas. But it's really hard to say.
Yeah. Any concern for Christian Gonzalez on T?
Not necessarily. It's like just the Burrow targets, like the potential for what those could be. Also, they haven't been particularly efficient versus like top end receivers, and probably just because whoever the Gonzalez matchup is, they don't even really send help. So it kind of balances out.
Yeah. One of the other kind of interesting spots this week is what's going to happen with Josh Jacobs. He's been getting in limited practices. Obviously, with salary cap DFS, we have the benefit of waiting and getting all of this news. But what are your thoughts on, I guess, Packers offense with Emmanuel Wilson at 5,300 getting the start versus if Josh Jacobs does go?
I mean, I think Emmanuel Wilson is like a pretty fair poor man's Josh Jacobs. He's like got the size to handle the carries. I kind of thought prior that he like had more of a pass game chops to him, but not really. So I think it's like a fair like 80% 1-for-1. I did really like what I saw out of Love last week with how he handled the situation of Jacobs going down in the middle of the game, kind of like contested game throughout. Still managed to like basically effectively play good QB to like get them to the win.
Yeah.
Watson too, as always, was just like hyper productive when healthy, and Dubs for some reason nobody ever clicks. So I think pass game is a little sneaky, but I don't think like it's exactly like an anti-correlated Wilson to Love. Like you could probably take these guys together with the pricing on Wilson. But I wouldn't rule out Love having to do a little more, given like Jacobs is a pretty big touchdown vacuum, and they're also a little less willing to give all the carries to Wilson.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I feel like at this point in the season, anyone who has been trying to play Love stacks, myself included, we've been burned so many times that it just does not feel good going back.
It's a lot easier right now without Jacobs' craft. Like you know it's Dubs at this point, and you know it's Watson, which is like a great thing to fall back on because it comes with a lot of upside.
Yeah. Yep, that is a good shout there. I'm perusing around for some other input volatility spots. I mean, we did just get the news today. Dart is not going to play in this game versus the Lions. Any thoughts on what that means both for the Giants offense and also the Lions getting pushed?
I don't think it moves it too much. They're similarly reckless, one through the air and one with the legs. So I think it's a slight boost to the pass catchers, which we did see last week. It's just that the conditions weren't really friendly to production. They're in the dome now. Like this game can go so many ways as far as like how much Detroit wins by, that it's kind of more dependent on that. Like if Detroit scores quickly versus if they sort of like kick a field goal once in a while or are grinding 12-play drives. More, as funny as it sounds, like that's more important, I think, to the Giants' success than whatever it is they do.
Yeah. Is this a spot, obviously the massive team total for the Lions, is this a spot where you're interested in them, or are you looking for ways to fade what's going to probably be a pretty popular spot for the field?
I haven't really paid too much attention to the Lions. I think relatively it would be a fade because they have the Thanksgiving game coming. And this is just like a scrimmage. So if they could just get out of there, I think they're going to look at Thursday.
Okay. Yeah, because then I guess you could have the other narrative. They just had the pretty bad loss there the week previous. Do they come back and try to bounce back in a big way?
Right. I mean, I think it's like this isn't like the Commander spot where there's some get back here. This this is like not non-divisional. I think they just get out of here with a win.
I just remembered the other running back situation I wanted to ask you about that I think has a decent amount of input volatility, and that's the Steelers. Jalen Warren gets banged up in that game with an ankle injury. Kenny Gainwell does a lot of damage through the air. Sounds like Warren's going to play this week. Pretty good matchup versus Chicago. But how do you feel about this Pittsburgh backfield?
If Warren's in, it'll be Warren ahead. Just because he has the ability to handle more rushing attempts. But like the passing game aspect of this offense is just so valuable because Rodgers can't move. So he's always looking for that check down. Doesn't really help that most of these receivers don't have a prayer of getting open. So that check down just becomes like the first read a lot of the time. Like if it's Warren, if Warren's in it, it'll be him. So I'm not sure I'm on the same page with Gainwell ahead of Warren.
Mm-hmm. Is that like would that be a stay away spot for you, just with them splitting and Warren losing a lot of that?
With that pricing, almost certainly it's very tough to get to either. Yeah, unless one of these guys is actually out.
Any thoughts on the overall offense? I guess it would mainly be Metcalf that we'd be caring about if it's Rudolph versus Rodgers. And I guess either way, do you have interest in Metcalf here against Chicago?
I kind of think that if we're going Rudolph, you might actually get more Metcalf because the yards per route we've seen with Metcalf at this point with Rodgers hasn't been too inspiring. And kind of like even dwindling as the year goes on, or as like coverage shades that way, because there's just no threats around him on this offense, so you can really key in on him. So maybe it could just be the whole thing is kind of stale. So I mean, I'm not too into it. They had probably the best chance to really get big production last week, and even had the ball a good amount of time and couldn't really get there. So I think they're just like very unexplosive.
Yeah. On the other side of the ball, curious your thoughts on, is there a potential for a Luther Burden breakout, or is that his increase in snaps? Is that a bit more of a Fugazi just because they were running so much two tight end personnel last week?
On Burden, no, I think he's the guy. And
okay.
It's sort of that time of year anyway.
Okay, so he's someone you'd be interested in at 3,600?
Yes. I mean, he's also shown much more juice than even DJ Moore. I liked him coming out of college myself, so him being second rounder was a bit of a surprise to me. Yeah, honestly, they need that like live wire type of speed anyway to help space things out a little bit. And since DJ Moore doesn't really have that at this juncture, I think it just opens things up so much. And they're clearly aware of it since his uptick is all post buy. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can see here, I mean, even in the target shares, obviously Rome's still leading the way at 21%, but Burden at 16.2 for you guys, DJ Moore at 15.2, and, Olamide kind of now sent to the shadow realm at 5.2.
Right. Per route, he's been as good as Rome. But given like what he does without really needing the ball, I think there's even greater value. But I'm not going to talk about like what they should do.
Yeah. Ben Johnson is a little tricky to figure out there. Let's move along here and talk about your favorite game. And this is actually going to be kind of part and parcel maybe with talking about chalk as well, but sounds like you got some interest in this Cardinals Jacksonville game.
Yeah, to me, it's actually more of a favorite because of what you can do with the Jaguars side. I'm probably going to largely avoid like the extremely common Brissett stack, which is Brissett, Wilson, McBride. There's just a lot of ways to play it in that you can do ETN with Jaguars. That's pretty anti-correlated to what the chalk would be. Given, depending on the status of like Bam Knight, him too would also be a decent way to slow the game. But personally, I actually like the Jaguars side. I think we've seen some really bad showings from Cardinals defensively the last 2 weeks. It coincided with like their stud rookie corner, Will Johnson, missing. I think he's questionable right now, so I'm following his status. And then Jaguars themselves were showing a lot to me offensively last week, probably their best offensive game of the year. And it's not even like Lawrence had much of a bad game. It's just he didn't really have to do much. Blocking was just eating up everything. Run game was doing whatever it wanted. So if they're to have like big unimpeded success, I think it's a little more likely it comes from the pass game this time around, just to have some of that regression, right? They had like 4 rushing touchdowns. That's also good timing with Brian Thomas coming back this week, probably. And I think Lawrence stays fairly low owned, one, because of the Brissett presence in this game, and also just because the pricing of the receivers is a little tricky with Thomas back in the mix. I would have him easily over the other two, though, as far as projection.
Thomas over, yeah. Brian Thomas, 20.4%. Jacoby Myers, I'm reading off the market share of receiving yards here, 19.5, and then Parker Washington, 18.7, really clumped up there together.
This is probably a function of snaps, I would think. If he's highest in market share but lowest, or just like his relative efficiency hasn't been good this year. But like I'm still drawing a little bit on last year's stuff when I think of Thomas.
Yeah, so it is a really interesting spot just because Lawrence feels like the one constant. We see him rushing. He's cheap. I mean, what are your thoughts? You mentioned ETN. At the start of that game, it seemed like Tootin was the guy. It was like 6 carries to 3. He had the touchdown. Any worry that continues and that ETN isn't the lead?
It makes sense that you would want to have Tootin at the goal line. So it could be similar to like the Ramondre Henderson spot.
Okay.
But like ETN, like it's a good comparison because ETN's been quite good this year. Really looking back to his old form. I guess Tootin's just a bigger threat than Ramondre might be because he has that spark and he does show like some electricity and probably has really earned that goal line role. So that's really the major threat to just the pass game, just the fact that they have 2 viable running backs that they can go to. But given that like they just had the 4 rushing touchdowns last week, I just always operate under assumption that if one side of the ball had like an outlier, if you're able to get in a situation where you can dictate the action, I kind of think that pendulum always swings back to the other way.
So as far as stacking Lawrence, you mentioned like you could play at the angle where it is through the run game and the defense. Would Lawrence, would it be skinny stacks? Would you include ETN? Would you double stack it? It does seem a little tricky.
I double stack it, including ETN, and I'm open to triple stacking. But I don't exclude ETN like I would some running backs with the quarterback. And also, like you play it like that, that's when you're okay with getting some of the Arizona pieces because it's still get it correlated to the game, but now you're not playing it in like a very common way.
Yeah, for sure. And it's definitely worth talking about some of the Cardinals stuff. We're obviously going to see a ton of ownership on Trey McBride, who I think you can continue to say is underpriced even at 6,800. Michael Wilson coming off of that monster game, 4,800. Anything else here other than just kind of the classic double stack that hit last week? I mean, I guess Greg Dortch was part of it as well.
Yeah, I mean, Dortch is a bit of a tilting spot because like I don't even think in a normal game he gets that level of snap share as like a slot guy. I think it's just like comeback trail stuff where there's no point going 2 tight end or like 2 running back that he got there to that extent. One interesting part is this running back split because of the roles where Knight has that very specific ground and pound role. So Knight kind of like you might want to sort of dock everyone in the game if you go Knight. And then Carter, let's say if you have like at least 2 Jacksonville pass catchers, you'd probably be more into Carter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't think it's going to be that much of a split. But let's say it's like 12-13 to like 9 or something. Like, I don't think they're necessarily this close because I think just like Knight is going to have that many more snaps. But like, if we're going to follow game flow, none of that really matters, right? Game flow would be like Jags are up 21-7. Well, Knight's not really going to get that many snaps at all going forward. Even if you're only projecting Michael Carter for like 9 or something, it's still in that spot. The second half is going to be very valuable for him.
Okay. In those running back plays, because you're more, so it sounds like you'd be more interested to play Carter as a bring back, and then Bam Knight would be more with Jacoby.
Not even necessarily, because I just think he's siphoning. He doesn't. Yeah. I mean, I guess this year he has more of a pass game role than he has in the past. So like, it's not that exclusive because they're so cheap. But I wouldn't play Bam Knight with Trevor Lawrence, for example. Yeah,
that makes sense. Let's talk about some of the other plays that are projected to be very popular, and right on cue, the big one in the chat has Chase Brown been mentioned. Only 6,200. He's had a monster role with Pirine out. Thoughts on him as chalk and just this overall spot for him versus New England?
I mentioned it a little bit in that the Chase role is Jamar Chase had such a monster role that the stuff is going to funnel to Chase Brown. It's just you're taking away 30-something% of the targets. And I don't really think T. Higgins is operating in the middle of the field like even as much as Chase Brown might. So just from that element, it's going to be warranted. And especially if it's Burrow, I don't think Burrow is going to play and they're going to keep him in like bubble wrap here. They have nothing to lose. It's like a relatively emotional home game return against a team that's won 8 in a row. They're going to want to just sling and win the game.
Yep. We've talked about some of the other chalk stuff. Obviously, the Cardinals, the Lions, Amon-Ra, and Gibbs, Wilson, if he plays. I guess a few things we haven't talked about, like Bijan, how do you feel about him with Kirk? He's still going to be popular. And then JSN as well, expensive and just certainly questioning how much he'll need to be used in the second half there.
Bijan, I'm not actually sure where ownership funnel is on the high end this week, right? Because we know where it is in the middle as far as like McBride, Chase Brown. I actually don't know where it goes top end. I actually think it's kind of flat. So like all these guys might be fairly flat because we're not getting like any crazy like running back or receiver values like Michael Wilson being like 3.4 last week. So I think you can play any of these more expensive guys that you feel like. We just know Taylor's not going to be owned, and I don't even think you should be going Taylor.
Yeah.
So, I'm fine with all those guys.
Okay. Yeah, my hunch would be that it is the Lions, Amon-Ra, and Gibbs that kind of fetch most of the high-end ownership.
Yeah. I would like my take is kind of like a little bit narrative-y. So it's not necessarily logical. I kind of not necessarily interested in those two together, at least Gibbs and St. Brown.
Right. If you play it through the one-off and just hope you get the alpha game.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some of your other favorite contrarian angles. We've hit on a few of them. Trevor Lawrence, Jordan Love. We haven't talked about this Colts Chiefs game. Obviously, big implications for the Chiefs here as they kind of fight for their playoff lives at home, 3.5-point favorites. What do you like in this game?
It would be a little more appealing if Indy also wasn't treating this as a playoff game. Because if you consider their side, they are going to benefit greatly from KC missing the playoffs as well. So they're going to jam what they want to do too, which is run the ball. But I kind of think that given that Colts know that too, there's an equal pushback on the other side where they're going to be even more inclined to live or die on Mahomes' arm, Mahomes' legs. So I kind of think you can have like a Josh Allen type playoff game here. Like there's no real need to like go to like the rely on Kareem Hunt, stuff like that. You're not going to try to slow the clock because of how much of a threat the Colts are when they have the ball. Like if you give the Colts the ball, you might not get the ball back for 10 minutes. So all those receivers are priced to play with, like especially Worthy, Kelce. Rice too, like me in particular, I'm not super sold on the Rice talent, especially how he's looked this year. But that's sort of a different story because he's still getting design play calls in a Reed and Mahomes offense.
Yeah.
But they definitely have enough to get there. Like you can take all of them with Mahomes even. And I think that there's a decent chance of elevated play call for them, especially if they take a lead. Because then you're not going to have Colts just sitting on the ball themselves.
What would be, I do think, Mahomes to Rice and Kelce will be fairly popular. Of those non-Rice Kelce options, who else would you be interested in sprinkling in there?
I'm still very interested in Worthy. Like it's not like I'm going to have relative to field, I would still go more Worthy than Rice, but I might be over on all of them.
Okay. Trying to get your 800,000 back that you lost on Worthy last week.
Yeah.
And then with anything, is this a spot just completely avoid the running game? I guess on both sides if you're not paying up
for sure.
For JT. Okay.
Yeah. It's like pretty exorbitant. I'm even looking like, can you really take a piece on the Colts side? And it's tough. Like unless like you're really playing that script where Chiefs are playing from ahead and now Colts are forced to throw the ball, you can get there that way. Like the Pittman Warren, I guess Downs when they're trailing gets a little bit more. So something like that. But it's even kind of hard to get there on Jones stacks, honestly. But I suppose you could still do Jones stacks as like sort of like a full game stack, assuming that Chiefs are doing a lot. Jones has to do a little more himself. But yeah, the Jones price is a little tougher than the receivers.
It's so tricky with Jones in that like his really good games are so directly correlated with Jonathan Taylor's good games. I guess the Falcons game would be an example against that. But in general, it's like JT's success sets up the play action, make things really easy on Jones. So it's like, it's hard to see those scenarios where they're not able to move the ball with Taylor, but then Jones is just like absolutely cooking through the air.
I have them a little bit anti-correlated. And there were like, if you would believe it, there are a few games early in the year where Taylor didn't score touchdowns. And if you recall, that's when Jones was eating. I got 3 out of the first 4 games, or 2 out of the first 4, Taylor didn't score. 3 out of the first 4, he didn't get a rushing touchdown. So that's when Jones was doing his damage.
Yeah, and that the uncorrelated element, I guess I meant more from like an overall game flow. I think from the fantasy standpoint, it's at the goal line, right? Like that's where if you get the Daniel Jones goal line carries, that's where it can really swing.
Yeah, I mean, he himself also has taken a step back. He's not like they were calling him MVP early on. He's not that. But he can certainly facilitate at least one of the pass catchers. Just if you were to get that pass attempt volume.
If you had to choose between like a Pittman, Pierce, Downs, do you have a favorite price adjusted? I think they're all going to be low owned.
They're all. I mean, it wouldn't be Pierce. Just because he's kind of like that, he's not necessarily a guy that you are going to from the trailing script. Mm-hmm. He's more like just like a deep ball. So it would be Downs, Pittman, Warren.
Yep. We haven't talked about this spot for the Ravens. They're huge favorites here at home, 13.5 points. They got the big team total up here at 29. Obviously, Big Dog is not going to be a secret to anyone, but curious on your thoughts here for Lamar and maybe some of the pass catchers.
This is sort of to follow up the idea of what I mentioned about the Jags and how I think NFL teams operate when one side just does nothing, and it's not necessarily because of like their own failures or just like even just like how the game flow went. In the Ravens case, it was their own failures, but I think just like they always want to get right. And so I'm not exactly sure how owned Lamar is. Probably not so much given that spread, but I always like playing the bounce back in like these matchups where it's possible they could just do whatever they want, right? Like low resistance, like Jets, possibly like for the Jags, Cardinals this week. Lamar especially needs to get right in the box score.
Yeah, I think one of the big issues for him this year has been like he's just not running as much either. So do you worry about his ceiling in a spot like this?
I do, but also like all it takes for him is one, and at least like Zay Flowers in this spot with like man coverage stuff. Gardner gone. There's enough where like just him to Zay is more than enough, and it's not as if you need him to get like that 35 that he was putting up in the past. Just like at quarterback scoring in general this year is a little bit muted, and so you don't really need like a crazy ceiling. Just Flowers, like Andrews has been going nuts, like sort of like looks going away from Andrews and like not having Henry pounded in is probably enough for him to get there if they score 3 or 4 touchdowns.
Yep. Yeah, and I assume part of the interest here comes from, if there is another guy who gets steamed, we were talking about who could condense at the high end. I could see Derrick Henry at 7,600 starting to get up there in ownership for running back.
I suppose just from the total, but like he's never actually projecting well. Maybe more in like these like larger fields where they're looking at things like that. But anyone like going heavy into projection stuff, not necessarily.
Yeah, and you do get Justice Hill will be back this week. He had missed, he had vultured 2 weeks ago, and that was annoying. But you got to imagine Justice Hill not as big of a role if they are, have a 2 touchdown lead.
Yeah.
Let's see here.
I will mention Mitchell on the other side a little bit. If Jets have anything to do remaining in this season, it would just be to get 80 Mitchell some burn out there. See what they have.
Yeah, 80 Mitchell, immensely talented and seems to just make boneheaded plays week after week. But yeah, 3,200 if you're looking for the bring back. Would you use him exclusively as Lamar bringbacks?
Not like it's not necessarily because of his price tag. He doesn't even need to be like it's gonna be one catch on his own. Can still get there.
I know you didn't get to this game yet in some of your research, but Jake was wondering if you had any takes on Philadelphia, Dallas before we look at a couple of lineups here.
Yeah, this is like the all drama bowl. So there's a lot of divisional implications here actually, and I kind of think it's more important for Dallas. So like given that it's going to be pretty contested, Eagles are going to drain clock. I could see Dallas doing very well if they were to dictate offense on their terms early, which would be through the air. And Eagles are pretty burnable to that extent. It could definitely speed up. It reminds me a little bit of the spot earlier in the year when it was like Rams, Eagles, and that happened to speed up the Eagles.
Yeah.
I could see a little bit of that. And it helps that Dallas is just way more likely to have success through the air. So I like CD here. He probably doesn't go terribly owned. Lot of like Pickens praise. So we might get a little more attention shaded towards him, which would open up CD. And that's sort of the dynamic that they were looking for when they signed Pickens.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I do think it's like, we're kind of getting an analog to like the Chase T Higgins stuff from last year with Lamb and Pickens, where it was like T had really narrowed the target gap between those two down the stretch, but Chase still obviously liable to pop off for those 35-point games.
Right. So I'm seeing it as Hurts, Brown, and Vontae Smith being fairly high owned in this game. Mm-hmm. But I'm a little more interested in playing the Dallas side and taking like a Devontae Smith or AJ Brown on the other side on a DAC team. If I were to play it on like one team.
And this another similarity to a game I remember you talking about, maybe it was like a month ago when the Vikings played the Eagles, and you get the 4 wide receivers in that game who can all just take the top off on a single play. You kind of get that here as
Right.
well.
That's probably actually a better analog.
And just taking some shots and mixing and matching Brown, Smith, Lamb, Pickens, or maybe get off Pickens if he becomes very popular.
Yeah, but Eagles defense is pretty high variance in like what happens, what they are to allow, because it's like a lot of man coverage, but they also don't defend run that well.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not. That's at least that's from the seasonal level. The defense has definitely gotten better in the last few weeks, so might be mistaken there. Yeah, I kind of think they're a little more stout on the run at this juncture. So. Yeah, but with Dallas, they're just more likely to live and die with like the receivers, given what we just saw, and Dak's been going well all year.
Let's wrap up here as we always do, looking at a few lineups here. I did run some in the Sims on Run the Sims, did a 3K field, which is fairly representative of the small field stuff that a lot of people who watch this show play, and we can see what's popping out here. I mean, one name we did not talk about, we didn't get to any of the vomit stacks really this week. I guess Lawrence kind of applies, but what do you think about seeing a Tyler Shuck, Vele, Chris Olave team bubble?
I did not think about that at all. I don't know.
Yeah, that feels pretty gross. Drake Maye is the top one, pretty classic double stack to Diggs and Henry. I was thinking about that stack a little bit, and I'm just wondering, do you worry about so much of the production being able to come on the ground that like passing double stack can't reach its ceiling?
Henry's really cheap. We didn't really talk about Henry, but we did mention sort of how Cincinnati is with tight ends.
Yeah.
And he actually hasn't really had a double-digit output in quite some time, even though the role is the same. So he's pretty sneaky. But nowadays DFS, they project things as like, they don't really project like that, where like someone who's run kind of bad gets overlooked. But I think he's like textbook for that type of play.
What do you make of this Emmanuel Wilson stuff? Because he is, even with the ownership and stuff, he is appearing in virtually every single one of these lineups. Like, let's even assume like 30 to 35% ownership for him. Obviously assume Jacobs is out. What do you do with him if he's popping up in all these top lineups?
It's fair, because there's no real way to play it differently with the Packers. Because I would like to consider what it looks like if he doesn't do well. But there's not much you can do with the Vikings. Like you could go like Aaron Jones, who not necessarily is like carrying the ball that much. So it's not like directly leverage against that. And then Vikings defense is like, okay, but like Love really doesn't really make any mistakes at this moment. So it's just difficult. Like, it's like I can see Love pass game. That's about it.
Yep. There is a Lamar team here in the top 4. It's a Lamar double to Zay and Andrews. Really interesting quirk on this one. It has the Jets defense. I think I would IKB the Sims on Jets defense versus my Lamar double stack. It does have a DeAndre Swift, DK Metcalf mini correlation, which is kind of interesting in there as well.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. We can probably X that one.
Let's see what Trevor Lawrence, because that was one of the angles you were talking about. There's one here, top EV 129.71%. It's a Lawrence skinny to Jacoby Myers, not using any Cardinals in here, but kind of getting in some other high ceiling plays. There's also a naked Lawrence. There's an ETN in Parker Washington with Lawrence. So this kind of reflects what you were talking about with the different ways to stack him up.
Yeah, a little bit is also driven by the Brian Thomas numbers being a little low. So just keep in mind, I'm slightly higher on him relative to the other receivers. So he would probably mix in more in my Lawrence.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Let's see. We didn't see any Mahomes stuff there at the top. Let's see. Mahomes.
So I will say now that Shuck came up, it's not bad.
Okay. You now that, I mean, you've been on the Shuck vomit stacks at points this year.
Just at that price, it's hard to do worse. 4.4K in Olave's in play. Kamara's fine, and that would be a fine way to play Bijan too.
Yeah. Bijan not showing up in a lot of these Shuck line. Oh, here he is in one. It's a Shuck to Juwan Johnson Olave with the Bijan bring back. So yeah,
and maybe they might be down Drake London. Also, they're not playing for anything anymore. The Falcons.
Nope. We saw the Lamar ones. Let's see if there were any Jordan Love ones and if they include Emmanuel Wilson. So yeah, there is a Love Wilson Watson team, a Love Wilson Dobbs Watson. So it really is like including Wilson as part of the stacks. Yeah. And this one even gets your one-off 80 Mitchell take in here. So you get Bijan, JSN, 80 Mitchell, Tyler Warren, Jawan, and then that's
pretty good. There's not going to be too many Bijan, JSN combos as well.
Yeah.
And then you get the Bijan, Juwan Johnson. So
good stuff, guys. I'm obviously here on Run the Sims using the Sim Runner Pro. You can go into the settings yourself. You can see here how many lineups, the field contest simulations. I didn't force any stacks here, but you can go in and mess with this. And then, of course, the Shady Advice Portfolio diversifying tool is in here. And now for the rest of the season, you can get 50% off your first payment for Run the Sim subs with promo code Pete. So if you want to take advantage of it for an annual sub, you can get that half off essentially for the year. Otherwise, monthly sub, it would be first payment 50% off there. But Youda, thank you for hopping on early here today. Any other final words for you before we bring JM on?
No, thanks for having me.
Yeah, good luck in week 12. Thanks for all of the alpha. And I believe we have a programming note. Next week, we will have the Friday show. Ship My Money is going to sub in for you next week, correct?
Yes, that's right.
All right, so we will catch you back here in a couple of weeks. Have a happy Thanksgiving, and let's get ready for Block Party.
Peter's one of the greatest depositors I've ever seen.
Trust the process. Let's go.
I got auto matched with Levitan. Bullshit.
I just go the other way. In that 66, I win all the money. All the money.
If I had 150 lineups, I'd win too.
AP, 35 bullets in your head like KD. Bust it, bitch, go bust it. And I had 10 points with me in Russia.
Hey, everyone.
All right, there he is. What, Oklahoma, did you say?
Oh, yeah. I had to, I'm not really in frame, but I had to get the heifer in there. Last year we had the breast milk picture at my mother-in-law's. Now I'm at my brother-in-law's. So a different aesthetic, but yeah. So here we are. We made it. 4 hours of sleep. Little unplanned overnight in Denver, your old stomping grounds. And made it to Oklahoma on low sleep and ready to rock and roll.
All right, man. We had Youda as the opener today, so he got the crowd all warmed up. And,
I'm gonna try to match the energy, and see what we can bring to the table here. It's fun listening to you guys because I've been really in a bubble this week because it's such a unique week with travel coming up and then not flying on Tuesday because we're flying at the end of the week. And so that actually gave me kind of like a little bit less time to work on Tuesday because I'm at the house, and so the kids are around, and as opposed to just being on the go all day and listening to stuff, watching stuff. And so, it's fun to kind of come out of the bubble a little bit and get a sense of where the field's at. I looked at ownership projection for the first time while you guys were talking, and it's a fun week because I've got kind of a different, I've got a different angle and different look, I think, maybe than the field is going to have. So hopefully I can bring some value to the table here and get us going for this week.
Awesome. Yeah, let's dive in just as we always do, kind of at the top here. I got the totals pulled up here on the Fantasy Life odds screener. Some decent game totals. Bengals, Patriots, 51. It sounds like we might not get Joe Burrow now based on some of the most recent reports I read. Colts, Chiefs, that big game there for playoff implications, 50-point total. Giants, Lions, no Jackson Dart. unfortunately, but that total is hanging strong for now. We talked a little bit about Jags Cardinals with Youda 47.5, and then Eagles Cowboys 47.5. Those are kind of the heavy hitter games from a total perspective. What else are you seeing?
Yeah, I don't know that I see a game. I see teams. I see to me, the Patriots and Lions, it's like a foregone conclusion that each team scores 30 plus real life points. And then it's just a question of where the fantasy output comes from. Mm-hmm. And then I don't really see any game environments that are exciting me this week, which doesn't mean that a game environment can't take off. But, we were on the Cardinals last week. It was actually funny because 2 times this season, we built like one of my favorite rosters on air, and we were about to do it again last week. And I don't know if anybody noticed, but it was like we had 3,800 left, and it was like, you could put in Michael Wilson here, you could go a different direction, and we kind of left that open, right? But that was one of my core rosters. And this is a different setup for the Cardinals, right? Like everybody's going to flood to Michael Wilson, but like were people flooding to Marvin Harrison Jr. at 5,800? People are going to flood to Michael Wilson at 4,800. I think it's kind of a week where we're going to see people like playing catch up for things that happened in past weeks. Emmanuel Wilson going to be super popular, perfectly fine play, but like realistically, we would expect Josh Jacobs to score about 20 points in this spot. So like, can Emmanuel Wilson go higher? Yes. Is he a strong play at salary? Yes. But I just think there are a lot of other ways or Youdacao mentioned, like you probably won't see a lot of JSN Bijan rosters. Like I've had a JSN Bijan, Amon-Ra St. Brown, T. Higgins roster that I really liked, and so I think that if we're seeing things a little bit differently, that doesn't necessarily mean that the way we're seeing things is better, but differently is always good in DFS, right? And so I think that there are some angles this week that are interesting. But yeah, to me, the Patriots and Lions are 2 teams that I'm like, well, you want pieces of these offenses. And then you've got the Bengals where it's not the best setup. Ideally, Joe Burrow plays, but it's not the best setup but against the Patriots. But also it's like, well, with Jamar Chase taken out, that's a significant number of targets that can spill down. And we have a pretty clear funnel in terms of how teams attack the Patriots through the air with tight ends and running backs. So actually, to me, one of the key pieces of injury news is Mike Gesicki, because if Mike Gesicki's out, Noah Fant's averaging, I think it's like 9 points per game with Flacco under center, 8 points per game on the season, something like that. And he's going to be going against his tight end funnel without Jamar Chase, right? Where like 12, 13, 14 points at 3,100 is very much in play. And like a 17-point game wouldn't be shocking, right? And then if Noah Fant's out and Gesicki's in, then the question is like, do they ease Gesicki back in? Or is this a Gesicki spot? I also noticed Travion Henderson and Ramondre Stevenson getting no like love from ownership projections.
Yeah.
But that's just the uncertainty, right? We know that we can attack this Bengals defense. And I think that one of the mistakes that people make is valuing certainty on a player's role over directional certainty. And so to me, directional certainty is just as important. And so because there's 2 pieces, there's the certainty on like a player's role, but then people are attacking like a player with a big role in a bad offense that's probably not going to score a lot of points. When you have directional certainty where you're certain that this team is going to score a lot of points and you're certain that a lot of these points are going to come through the backfield, like then the guessing game on which running back actually becomes more viable to think about, because what people don't realize is when they're taking that directional certainty on the roll, what they're missing is like the actual second step that they still have to take of like, is the production there? Does the game environment work in their favor? Does this thing play out the right way? We know that things are going to play out the right way for the Patriots backfield. So it's a spot where it's like the way that I look at certainty is different, I think, than the way the field looks at certainty, and plays to my advantage on a week like this. So I really like this week. And Patriots and Lions really stand out to me. And then, we'll hit on some other spots as we kind of go through this.
For sure. Yeah. Not to get too far ahead of ourselves. I brought this up with Youda a little bit, but I always like using the underdog drafts as kind of like a sentiment gauge for stuff. And Travion Henderson has been a top 7, top 8 pick in basically every draft. Like people are not budging. Projections have come out, rankings have come out. They have him much, much lower than that. And drafters are like, nope. Henderson versus the Bengals, like sign me up. So I do wonder, like, if some of the early ownership projections are more like algo and projection driven and not reflecting kind of the true excitement for, hey, the rookie who just broke out in the best running back matchup here, coupled with input volatility of like, what if Ramondre is in more of a reduced role? So I'll be really curious to see what that ownership settles.
Yeah. And my angle is actually understanding, the Patriots and how this team is likely to operate. My angle is the opposite of like, what if Ramondre is going to get the start. I would be very surprised if he doesn't. And then the question is, does he get the start and get 45 or 50% of the work? Does he get the start and get 55, 60% of the work? I don't think it goes higher than that, but there's a reason they like him. And from the outside, we're fantasy football players. And so that's the lens through which a lot of people look at things. And it's like, all the banging on the table of like, why can't they get Kyle Williams snaps? And then he's out there and 3 times he has, misconnects with Drake Maye, probably because he's not on the same page, right? Like we're not there on the field. We don't know exactly what's happening, but all 3 of those look like he was running the wrong route, reading the defense incorrectly. So there's always little things that the team is looking for. The way Vrabel has talked about Travion Henderson is like, yeah, we're proud of him. He continues to come along. There's still a lot of room for growth. Obviously, a coach is going to say that, but it certainly does seem like there is something about Ramondre that they really like. And in a spot where that big physical running style plays really well against the Bengals too. Like I think that Ramondre ends up getting as many touches as Travion, or maybe even a couple more at 5,200. And so, yeah, I think that there's, we'll get to running back obviously, but I think that there's just some interesting things to think about here at that position, at other positions. And so, yeah, that's, I guess my head's kind of all over the place from lack of sleep, but yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Let's transition over and talk quarterback. And I will mention, you talked about the lineup we built last week, even not having Wilson, and we had Dortch, and I always put that lineup in a tournament, and it finished well above the cash line there. That lineup we built on Friday was in good shape with just McBride and Brissett. And then Youda gave the Josh Allen play. That was his favorite contrarian quarterback. So you guys were on fire.
Last week. Yeah, I ended up finishing. It's been a weird season. I got 7th in the game changer and 11th in the face mask. But I've had a 2nd, 6th, 9th, and 11th in the face mask all on different weekends, but I haven't been able to scoop a win yet. So we'll see if that's coming here before the end of the season. But yeah, I mean, the Brissett was, I think that was the way to go last week. I don't think it's as clear this week, right? Like last week, I had 3 rosters in play, and they were all Brissett rosters. All with McBride, all with Dortch, and 2 with Wilson. Things are not that straightforward to me this week, but I think there are some things that do stand out to me, like holistically is like, okay, this is pretty straightforward here. This is pretty straightforward over here. Even if it's just directionally, like I think a lot of decisions are being made for me based on what the slate's providing.
Yeah, and let's start up here at the high end. And I would say this week is almost the inverse of last week in that, like, the high-end quarterbacks are all in, like, really good spots, either because of the team total or the matchup. Obviously, Drake Maye versus Cincinnati, Lamar Jackson versus this Jets secondary that traded away all of its pieces at the deadline, Hurts versus the Cowboys. I mean, every team except Geno, or every quarterback except Geno has gone off against the Cowboys. And then even Mahomes at home versus Indy in, like, a must-win game, I think you could say is a pretty good spot for all of them. So of those 4 there at the high end, who interests you the most?
Yeah, well, I lean Drake Maye because of this Squirrel Patrol coined this term last week on Soloship, stack certainty, which is something that I always talk about. And to be clear, like, we should always have context for what types of contests we're talking about, right? This year I've been primarily playing smaller field, single entry 3 max, and the most certainty you can pack onto a roster, the better, right? That's how I attack those contests, is just how much certainty can I pack on? And that's not certainty based on projections, but it's certainty based on how I understand these teams, these players, these games. And so it can lead to my rosters being a little bit different from the field while still just being full of certainty for me. But even if you're playing MME, when I was doing MME last year, the year before that, it's all about your core having a ton of certainty on it, right? And so that certainty isn't just, can this quarterback have a good game, but then the mathematical component of, do I get 2 spots right when this quarterback hits? Do I get 3 spots right? That's why I've been on Brissett plus McBride the last 2 weeks, is because, like, this is now 5 weeks in a row that they've hit. And so that you're getting 2 spots right with a high degree of certainty. So the Drake Maye one is interesting because I feel so certain directionally about this offense. And also Cincinnati very quietly has kind of erased wide receivers. The Patriots have so many wide receivers because it's really about DJ Turner. And the Patriots have so many wide receivers that I don't know that the Bengals can totally do that the way they have to other teams. But we do know that they funnel to the tight end. And so something like Drake Maye plus Hunter Henry plus one of the running backs, I think is just a very straightforward way to play this one. Mahomes and Kelce, I think, is really interesting. Kelce actually has more points per game than Tyler Warren on the season. And like I shouted out in week 3, it was like, man, Kelce looks a lot better than he looked last year. And then kind of stopped paying attention to Kelce since then. It's like, well, the points just keep piling up, right? So I think that there's a lot of certainty there in a spot where I expect the Chiefs to be treating this like a playoff game. And then we get to less certainty because with Lamar, I kind of feel like Lamar has like a nagging injury that he's been carrying all season because he just, like, it doesn't look quite right. And then we don't expect the Jets to push them. And so the question is, like, does he get to the 25-28 that he was doing early in the season? I think he probably does. Does he ascend above that, right? That's the big question. And then obviously, who do you stack him with? It's usually Mark Andrews, but that never feels comfortable. So just the like math starts to dwindle a little bit on that play. The ceiling's a little bit lower. And the like stack certainty is a little bit lower. And then Hurts is actually like obviously extremely interesting, but I also think that the Cowboys defense is different. They showed it against the Raiders. That doesn't matter. That doesn't count. But Quinnen Williams added, Overshown added, Hooker added, like those are important players at every level of the defense. And I do keep like when I play out this game in my mind, I keep coming to like a 24-20 type of game, which is exactly what they played to early in the season. But it's like, that's kind of how I see this game progressing, is a game in that type of range, right? And I forget who I've listened to a few other game previews this week where the picks were like 24-21, 24-20, 27-24. And that's not to say that that's definitely going to happen, but it just feels like that's kind of the vibe of where this is going, right? Of like, the Eagles are broken not because of the defenses they're playing. They're broken because of the way that they've been playing, right? And so that concerns me a little bit on that spot. So it's one of these where like I keep building Hurts, Devontae, AJ Brown practice builds, and then questioning like, is this as good as I want it to be? Like, do I just want it to be good because they're playing the Cowboys, or is it actually good? So I feel pretty confident I'll have exposure to that stack, but I think of those four, it's kind of at the bottom in terms of certainty of how it plays out, while obviously the ceiling is extremely high, but I feel more certain about those other spots.
You mentioned liking the Lions, or at least feeling good about their chances to score 30 this week. Does Goff factor into that, or are you seeing it more as like a Gibbs Monty game?
Yeah, I mean, I think the basic takeaway is listen to what I say about the Lions and then do the opposite. Because the 3 weeks I was heavy on the Lions were against Chicago. They scored 52. Against Cincinnati, they scored 37. Against Washington, they scored 44. And I was on the wrong players every time, right? So my weekend was like pinned heavily to the Lions on those. And it was just like I watched the team take off without the guys that I had. I mean, I think without Laporta, it does condense it down to if we get a Goff game, then Goff, you play all four of them. Goff plus Amon-Ra St. Brown plus Gibbs plus Jamo. You need about 112 points from those guys to keep you on a tournament winning pace. That's simplifying things. That's 200-point pace. But I think on a week like this, 200 plus gets the job done. And getting 200 plus from that chunk of salary and that many roster spots is tremendous, right? Even if you end up needing 225, 230 to ship a tournament, like that's a huge help. And so they've done it twice this year. They hit 112 once. They hit like 118 another time. Laporta played in both those games. And so now we have a few extra opportunities kind of filtered down to these guys. So yeah, to me, the question is like, I think that Amon-Ra St. Brown's a great one-off. I think Jamo's a great one-off. I think Gibbs is a great one-off. And then the question is like, does Goff get the touchdowns? And if he does, then the way to play it in my mind is you play all four of them because you got a pretty good chance. Again, 2 out of 10 games or whatever. Yeah, 2 out of 10 games, 20% of games this year. You've gotten 4 spots right. And we know that the math in the way that DraftKings prices players, usually you'll get an individual player right about 20 to 25% of the time. So to be able to get 4 spots right 20, 25% of the time on high price players who are really like, those are important spots to get right. There's a ton of value there. So yeah, the fear has seeped in of like, I have been so wrong I've been directionally right on this offense and so wrong on how it's going to play out and how the points are going to shake out. So that fear is there, but I do think that the way I'm going to have a Lions piece on every roster that doesn't have Goff. I'll have one of those 3 guys on every roster that doesn't have Goff, or at least that's my expectation. But I will absolutely have a Goff roster in like, with, I don't know, 10% of my bankroll or something like that. Because if it plays out that way, we get all the points on all those spots. I think that's the ideal way for it to play out for us.
You mentioned it not being quite as straightforward with Brissett this week. We do have that Arizona-Jacksonville game. Brissett only 5,300. We have Trevor Lawrence as well in this spot at 5,100. Both of them are kind of projecting as solid values. And it does look like Brissett is going to be the most popular quarterback on the slate right now, but the ownership projections look all pretty flat at the top. So I wouldn't be surprised to see any of these guys kind of muscle their way up to the top. But what is your thoughts on the quarterbacks in this game?
Yeah, I mean, Brissett plus McBride has been a staple for me for, I guess, 3 weeks in a row, and 2 weeks has been like the main thing I was pinning my weekend on. And I'm totally on board with that one again. My caution is like the run out we got last week was special, where the 49ers, he set the completion record. Most completions, NFL history, Jacoby Brissett, right? I actually remember the Drew Bledsoe game because they were down like 20-6 at halftime against Minnesota, and Bledsoe just came out through 70 passes and all, and came back and won that game. But the Brissett situation was unique. Like, we're not going to get that again. Plus this offensive line is in shambles. The Jags have a much better pass rush. There were 0 sacks last week on 57 pass attempts. You don't see that in the NFL, right? That's how bad the 49ers pass rush is. And what I kept saying last week was like the 49ers offense keeps getting better. The Cardinals defense keeps getting worse. And then the 49ers defense like is so beat up that they can't stop the Cardinals once they have to take off, right? So it's a different situation here where the matchup through the air is good for the Cardinals, but the risk of like offensive failure is higher, right? Because you're still trying to put drives together. And so if you have a bad run game and then a bad offensive line, you take a couple sacks, that might be the number. Like I forget what the exact numbers are, but like touchdowns scored on drives where you take a sack drops dramatically, right? Well, 2-3 drives where you take a sack, all of a sudden those are drives where you're probably not scoring points and you're probably punting the ball or kicking a field goal. And so, yeah, I think that Brissett plus McBride makes a ton of sense. And I think that Brissett plus McBride plus Dortcher plus Michael Wilson is very much in play. My caution is just like if Wilson's going to be one of the highest owned players, he had a career game that was far above and beyond what we've ever seen from him in opportunities in the past where he's been an alpha. And then like we wouldn't have been playing Marvin Harrison Jr. for 1K more in this spot. He wouldn't have been the highest owned player in this spot, right? And so what we're probably seeing here is like 7, 8, 9 targets for Michael Wilson, and he gets like 6 for 55, something like that. It's a solid game. So he can have another elite game, but by far the likeliest outcome is, what you would get from a 4,800 player, the 8 to 12 to 13 points. And so, yeah, I don't personally think I'm going to be chasing that spot at all this week. And I don't think it's a bad play. I just think that there are better ways to build a roster, all together. And so that's how I'm looking at it. So yeah, for me, it's like Brissett plus McBride. Reeves had this stat that since week 6, McBride is number 3 in fantasy points per game behind Jonathan Taylor and CMC. Wow. And it's like, we're paying $6,800 for him, right? He's still underpriced here. And then, if he's hitting, Brissett's hitting. And so even at the continually growing price tags, there's still a really sharp way to go this week. And just to be clear, I don't think Wilson's a bad play. I just think that there are more red flags, I think, that people are probably giving it credit for.
Yes. Yeah. Still kind of a volatile profile as far as being down the field.
100%. Yeah.
I think we hit on all the top guys, the top values. I want to make sure there's nobody else in your kind of tighter pool for quarterbacks that we didn't hit on, Caleb Williams, anything else that we haven't mentioned yet? Or are you going to be pretty narrow?
I was surprised. Yeah. I'm going to be, I guess I'll be almost less narrow at quarterback than other spots, right? Because I do like all 4 of those top guys we talked about. I like Goff and I like Brissett. The one we haven't touched on is Tyrod Taylor.
Okay.
And so obviously Youdacao, by far one of the sharpest DFS players, he shouted out Adonai Mitchell. I honestly think you can throw Tyrod and Adonai Mitchell and even John Mechie on there together, right? What he talked about was, people have been watching this, right? You guys heard him say it, but it was like this idea of what do the Jets have left to play for, right? You're going to put Adonai Mitchell out there, you're going to see what you have in these young players. Well, they also traded for John Mechie. Mechie played the most snaps out of the wideouts last week. And so this component of, I always think of these blocks, right? Mechie plus Adonai Mitchell is 6,500. What are you typically getting from, that's Chris Olave, that's Jalen Waddle, right? You're getting some games of 11, 12, 13 points. A lot of times you're getting 18. You're pretty happy if you get 20 to 22, 24. And every once in a while, once or twice a season, you might get like 30, right? Adonai Mitchell plus John Mechie in a game where they're going to be chasing points, in a game where the Jets should be throwing more than normal, right? Let's say 30 to 33 pass attempts. In a game where Mason Taylor's being devalued in the offense, his role has been scaled back, and it's a tough matchup for tight ends. So yeah, I think that this entire stack makes a lot of sense and opens up a lot because you play them all together and you're paying 700 more, 800 more than you're paying for Jonathan Taylor. And don't we think that we can get 30 to 40 points from a quarterback plus his 2 lead wide receivers? Yeah, but then also there's this, it's one of the things I liked about the Cardinals last week, and I laid this out in the journal, was like, if you take Marvin Harrison, and I said, like, Marvin Harrison Jr.'s points aren't just going to flow to these guys. Right? If you took all the wide receivers on the Cardinals, plus Trey McBride, plus Brissett across their games, they were putting up about 70 to 80 points. And you needed about 70 to 80 points from that block of players. But also there's the high-end run out of, like, if things go well, you still have a pathway to get, like, 100 plus from this block of 4 players, which, we got that run out that ended up happening. Well, it's similar with Tyrod Taylor and these 2 wideouts this week in that, like, you're really playing them. You win if you get 30 to 35 points and free up enough salary to do anything you want on the weekend. But there's also the run out in which they end up putting up 45, 55 points. And they're actually part of the reason why you're winning a tournament, in addition to freeing you up to be able to do whatever you want on the rest of your roster. So yeah, I think that Tyrod Taylor is pretty interesting this week, rushing upside, a good passer still, and a trailing game script. So yeah, I think Tyrod Taylor is probably going overlooked, and I think he's a pretty solid way to save salary here.
All right, there you go. Youda came around on a Tyler Shuck, and we got JM on the Tyrod Taylor there if you need to save some money. Let's head over to running back. Speaking of not being able to save money, Jonathan Taylor, 10K. We got Bijan, Gibbs. Still, we'll see what happens with this Jacob stuff, but I'll include Henry Barkley here at the high end. Tell me what you're seeing up here.
Yeah, I mean, I think consensus is probably pretty right here, and that Gibbs is clearly the top way to go. There's clear opportunity for Bijan to hit for a big game, but a lot of risk of like offensive failure here, where not only do you have Kirk Cousins, whose arm looks clearly diminished, but then he's throwing to Darnell Mooney, who's not he's not an alpha, right? Darnell Mooney's a great number 2. And then the Saints play great defense at home, right? And they still have Cam Jordan. They still have Demario Davis. Like, they still have guys who are not, they're at the tail end of their career, but like there's an attitude to this defense, right? That you watch these Saints games in the Superdome, and it's like I don't think I've bet a team against the Saints in the Superdome. Like when the Patriots went and played there, I was like, I don't feel comfortable with like whatever they were favored by, 5.5, something like that. I was like, I don't know that I want to take this bet, right? It's just like a tough place to play, a tough defense, and then not a good offense right now for the Falcons, missing Drake London and with Kirk Cousins not being the same. So I think Bijan Robinson, already the question is like, can he get the touchdowns? Because he doesn't get a lot of touches inside the 5, inside the 10. And then it's like, can this offense get a lot of touchdowns? So I like Bijan as like a high floor play because he's going to be so central to this offense. He can hit for the 30+ points. I think it's harder for him to do it. Gibbs can hit for like 13 or 14, right? And just like knock our roster askew, but also he can go for 35 to 40. So it's like Gibbs has the higher ceiling. So I like him more. And obviously the great setup team wide. Derrick Henry, I mean, yeah, I think it's like, I'm with Youda in that I don't think that the field is really going to get here. And I don't think I'm really going to get here. But I think that like you can see the run out, right? You can see it happening. It's not a spot that I've been able to get comfortable with and like pull the trigger on. Saquon, Lane Johnson out, Quinnen Williams in for the Cowboys. This run offense has already been poor all season long. Literally won't surprise me if he has a big game, but I don't think I'm going to get there on tighter builds, right? If we're talking like, hey, what are we looking at for MME? He's somebody who I'm definitely mixing in. But in terms of like, what's my core? It's not going to be him, right? So it's like Gibbs, Bijan, and then really quickly we run out of options, right? It's like we get down, it's like, okay, if Travion Henderson is sharing the backfield with Ramondre, we have a lot of question marks there. Even Chase Brown, who's going to be so popular this week, and it's like against a team that like famously is giving up 150-yard rusher all season. Obviously, we're not playing Chase Brown for the points on the ground, but we're playing him. Then it's like, okay, but he really has to get the run out in the pass game. And so I think he can get there. I think he's a very solid play. I think the ceiling, right, he's not going to murder you for not playing him. He might get 22, 23, but he's not putting up like 30, or he's probably not putting up 30 something this week. But I think he's perfectly fine for what the running back position offers. But I also think that's more an indictment on the running back position this week than it is like a glowing, a glowing review of Chase Brown this week, right? So, I think that he's like one of the most viable guys. Emmanuel Wilson's one of the most viable guys in terms of saving salary. And yet I look at both those guys and I'm like, well, I'm not scared to miss out on them. My bigger question is like, if I have a roster where I can go up to, because I also really like Hunter Henry. I really like the Bengals tight ends. I like, the idea of Adonai Mitchell and John Mechie. So it's like, to me, salary's not that tight this week, even with things set up. But then it's like, am I paying for Bijan because I can, and then he gets me 22 points, and Emmanuel Wilson gets 16, 17. It's like, well, I could have just saved the salary and gone there, right? And so I do think that running back could very easily play out that way this week, to where there's really very few standout scores. When it's like that, I want to target the guys who can put up those standout scores. But also, I have to acknowledge, like, realistically, it's not that likely for Bijan, and maybe we just go down to Emmanuel Wilson. Maybe we just go down to Chase Brown. So, I don't think that those are as good of plays as they are going to look to people. Like, start of the week, I was just like, oh, you just lock Emmanuel Wilson on every roster. And then deeper into the week, it was like, It's like I wouldn't have a great projection for Josh Jacobs here. I'd be like, yeah, he's probably getting his 18, 22 points. And then Emmanuel Wilson, he's looked good this year, but he's still obviously a lesser back than Josh Jacobs. So, I don't think he's putting up, like a 25, 30 pointer like we've seen some of these times where running backs step in. But yeah, we basically go from Gibbs and Bijan down to these guys, and that's kind of the pool, right? You can get to these Jags running backs, you can get to Aaron Jones, but they're clearly inferior on paper to Chase Brown and Emmanuel Wilson. And then those guys to me are inferior to the way that the field is going to be treating them, and yet they still might be the guys that are the best ways to go on a roster this week.
Yeah, so and we do have ambiguity on a few other situations. Youda and I ran through a few of them, health of the Steelers running backs, health of the Cardinals running backs. You just mentioned the Jags running backs. I guess there's still the chance that a really strong value play opens up between now and Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, I don't get the sense that it will, but there is enough up in the air that's certainly like within the range of outcomes. If we get, a couple weeks ago when we recorded the show, we still didn't have news on DeAndre Swift, right? We simplified things by just being like, if Swift is out, just play Manung guy. That's a great play this week. Similar if one of these Jags running backs is out, because similar to when the Bears came off the bye and it was like, okay, we're not ready yet to just hand the reins over to Caleb Williams. But what we can do is use Caleb Williams in the ways that he is progressing and lean on the run game, which is really good. And same thing in Jacksonville. Like, they have really taken the pass game, like, from the top of the list down to like second or third on the list. And the run game has been a much bigger part of what they're doing. And it's a great matchup for the run game. And, you got these two backs splitting time. They're still both viable this week, even with that. But then if one of them misses, then it's like, oh yeah, wheels up for whichever guy is playing. I mean, LaQuint Allen is also going to be getting some touches, but it's like, especially if Etienne were to miss and we get Bashal Tutin in a lead role, I think that would be really nice at his price tag and what he's shown so far this year. But and I think regardless of how injury news shakes out for Arizona, I'm not that interested in that backfield. Regardless of how injury news shakes out for the Steelers, I don't know that I'm that interested in that backfield even, but I do think that this, we have the value, right? Like, Emmanuel Wilson is probably going to be the top value, but if we were to get one of these Jags running backs out, then there's some interest there. I'll also shout out Kenneth Walker, who's continuing to see a bigger role. And I think that if this were a spot for him to hit, if there were a spot for him to hit, it would be this. And so, I mean, I don't think I'm going to get there on tighter builds, but I think he's a very interesting guy to shout out, and definitely a guy to mix into MME play or larger field contests, because one of the things we like to think about is, what do you win when you win? And we've talked about this in recent weeks where it's like, yeah, you could go off the board at running back, but your ceiling is 25 points if you get this guy right. You're not that likely to get this guy right. And there's going to be a bunch of other running backs in this price range who score 25 points, Whereas this week, it's like Emmanuel Wilson could score 14 to 15 in a run game that hasn't been good this year. And Chase Brown could score 15, 16, 17, without scoring any touchdowns is probably where he lands. And then there's nothing else down here that really pops. And then all of a sudden, if Kenneth Walker has like a 30-point game, which he's capable of, then you're actually getting above the field, right? So then that makes it worth the risk to take him on. So again, like the contests I'm typically playing where you get a couple thousand or fewer entries you're trying to beat, I don't think I'm getting there, but I do think that it would be viable to get there. And I think in contests larger than that, you really start thinking about it.
One other name I do just want to ask you about, because it didn't talk about him with Youda. He's projecting fairly well. When I first saw like what he did last week, this matchup, I had like zero interest. What are you seeing with Ashton Genty? And I think the thesis would be right that like Shadur is so bad that they have these short fields, more time controlling the ball here. But is there any possible way to get to Genty this week?
If you'd given me 10 guesses on the name you were going to say,
I would
not have gotten there. No.
Really? Okay. Yeah.
I mean, I'm not playing a running back against the Browns. I guess is like a running back in a bad offense against the Browns. I'll play the Browns defense, but I'm not getting there on Genty.
Yep. I feel similarly. Let's head over to wide receiver here.
Hey, actually, let me ask you a question. Any discourse around Breece Hall this week in the industry and underdog drafts? And
no, he doesn't get drafted in the underdog drafts. I think people are feeling almost similar to the Genty stuff of like player on a bad team with a small team total and stuff. But you have some interest there?
I've been like, he's not on my list, but like I've on like 15 different practice builds has been like, maybe we put Breece Hall in here. And I haven't actually even clicked the button yet, but just looking through like, who's the guy who could put up 25, like can legitimately put up 25 or 30, and people just aren't even thinking about them. Breece Hall definitely fits that bucket. So he's not a projection play, but he's more like, oh, here's a really good running back on an offense that's dedicated to the run, and people are not playing him. So yeah, I mean, I think in that regard, he's interesting. Yeah,
and then I mean, if you were doing I know you mentioned Mechie and Adonai, but if you're playing Tyrod, you could play
Breece Hall in there. Just get all the touchdowns. Get all those Jets touchdowns this week.
yes, all 1.4 of them. All right, so no Jamar Chase obviously this week. So at the high end, JSN's 9K, Amon-Ra's 8K, CeeDee Lamb 7,900, Rashee Rice 7,700. I think that's your upper echelon there at wide receivers. I'm assuming Amon-Ra's your favorite of those.
No, I mean, I kind of think JSN still. I mean, all right. Yeah, I mean, I know we have concerns about the game flow and everything, and we saw the 12 pass attempt game. Like, that's what really spooks us was like Darnold threw the ball 12 times against Washington. What if that happens again? Like that was a unique game flow. I think we're likelier to still see, 25, 28 pass attempts. I think we still get the 100-yard game from JSN, right? He has one game all year under 93 yards, and that was against Arizona early in the season. So I think that the certainty is higher on JSN because we don't expect the Giants to be super competitive. It's Jameis, but it's like you still don't have any wide receivers to throw to. The wide receivers you are throwing to aren't even finishing their routes because, why? It's football. You're just getting paid to go out there and do this on Sundays. But no, I mean, I really like both these guys. I think they're both really solid. And it's an interesting week where one of the things that I like to try to do on a roster for smaller field contests is like, can I count up 6 spots on my roster where I feel really confident I'm getting 20 to 30 points with ceiling for more? And so like last week when you have Brissett, Dortch, Wilson, McBride, right? That block basically accounts for 3 of those players because it's like I'm getting 60 to 90 points from this block with upside for more. This is not a week where like any of the high price guys, none of the high price guys am I like, oh, I really think this guy's having a monster game. Not one of them. Like Gibbs can, Amon-Ra St. Brown can, but like we look through his game logs, pull them up if you can, but like we've got 2 games over 21 DraftKings points. I don't think people really realize that when they think about Amon-Ra St. Brown this season, 2 games above 20 DraftKings points. And one of them was that game against the Bears where they were like, oh, like Ben Johnson left. You guys think you're the kings of the division. Funny because the Bears are actually in first place now, but they're like, we're going to show you guys what your barometer is, like what you are trying to build toward. Like this is what a Super Bowl caliber team looks like. And they, it was late in the game. They went for it on like 4th and 4, 4th and 7, up by 3 scores and threw the ball, right? Like that was the Lions that game. It was sort of a weird, unique game. And then, 34-10 blowout against Cleveland where he ends up getting there on, 2 scores? Yeah, 2 touchdowns in that game. And so, you're playing Amon-Ra St. Brown. It's like, oh, he's so high confidence. He's got over 21 points twice all season, right? So, again, can he get there? Yeah. Can Gibbs get there? Yeah, but similar, right? He's got 2 elite games, one other like really strong game. But you kind of look across the board at all these high-priced pieces, and all of them, it's like, I don't know that any of them are putting up 35 or 40 this week. And then I just had to be like, well, maybe I worry less about being able to predict that and just say, can this guy get me 20 to 30 with upside for more? Can this guy get me 20 to 30 with upside for more? And to me, JSN and Amon-Ra St. Brown very much check those boxes, right? And so, on this particular week, that like, because as we go down at wide receiver, like people are we're all gonna like AJ Brown and Devontae Smith, but also how confident are we that they're getting us 20 to 30 with upside for more? Not confident. They can do it, but we're not confident, right? And so I think getting some of these guys who we have that confidence in can do that could end up having a lot of value this week, right? And like the thing is, we're just trying to figure out how to construct a roster on each individual week because every week is different. So what I kept saying last week was like, this feels like a week where we're going to have 4 or 5 guys scoring well over 30. And literally we didn't get that anywhere except for Michael Wilson, which we were not rostering him for that, right? But because of the way that I was constructing rosters in order to account for that possibility, it still ended up being like, oh, hey, it was a great weekend, right? And so I might be completely wrong on the way this plays out, and we get 3 or 4 guys going for 35 plus. But if we do, they're probably coming from this pool of players. And so just like thinking through that lens and being like, okay, well, let me just get as much certainty as I can onto these rosters. So from that lens, I think we're splitting hairs, like picking JSN over Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think they're both great plays in that category of like, you're just getting points with these guys. And that's so valuable in DFS, especially at this point in the season with injuries, and we're not getting premium matchups. And there's not a lot to feel great about at running back or wide receiver from a certainty perspective. And so, both those guys I think are really strong plays this week.
What about some of the mid-tier guys? I mean, you do have some of the teammates, George Pickens at 6,900, Jameson Williams at 5,700. I think those guys are in decent spots. Any love for them?
Yeah, I think Jamo is a great play. I think he's a fantastic play. I forget what it is. He's averaging whatever he's averaging per game over his last 5 games. It includes a 0-point score in there. I think it's 16.9 across his last 5 games with a 0-point score in there. And you have to go all the way up to George Pickens before you hit a player on this slate, a wide receiver on the slate who's averaging more points per game than Jamo is across his last 5, right? So point being, at 5,700, he's really underpriced. If he can, he's basically like producing like a 6.5, 6.7K wideout across the last 5 games with a 0 in there. And so we know that they're emphasizing him with Dan Campbell taking over play calling. And so, yeah, I think he's a tremendous play and one of the sharpest ways to kind of get a mid-tier wide receiver that you feel confident in their floor and ceiling. Devontae Smith and AJ Brown, it's just a question of like, can this offense get on track? And if they can, the ceiling's there for both of those guys. And so I think we have to be thinking about them, accounting for them. It's harder for me to see the pathways to ceiling on, it's probably easier for me to see the pathway to ceiling on CeeDee Lamb than George Pickens, because CeeDee Lamb, they can move him into the slot. They can, like, they're going to move him around a little bit more, right? And so I feel like there's more opportunities for him to be matched up on Adoree Jackson, more opportunities for him to be kind of schemed open in the middle of the field than George Pickens against, what's a tremendous pass defense. I'll be really surprised if either of these wideouts goes for 30 points. But I also think they're both going to get like 17 plus, right? And one of them is probably getting 22, 23. So I think they're very much in the mix this week. Rashee Rice is very much in the mix, right? Like there's a few weeks ago where I heard some people being like, oh man, just keep playing Rashee Rice until his price tag's at 9K or 10K. And I'm like, is he really being used like that? Like, I don't think so. Is he really that good, right? He's probably really high-end number 2 on a lot of teams. Like, he's not an elite, like Amon-Ra St. Brown, CeeDee Lamb, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Jamar Chase. Like, that's who he's priced around, right? But I do think that in this spot, there's viability to going there. And then we haven't really talked about T. Higgins yet. It's an interesting one, right? Because that there's a couple things, right? I think it's 4 games without Jamar Chase, since Jamar Chase came into the league. And he hasn't been like heavily emphasized in those games because he doesn't get these schemed like short area targets. That's not the type of wide receiver he is. He's still this perimeter, contested catch type guy, downfield type guy. On top of that, like the knock on this team, this offense, as long as Zach Taylor's been there, is like they really don't do anything to scheme their players open. They're not a creative offense. It's kind of like, okay, we've got good players, go out there and run your routes and go get open, right? And so if they decide this week, like, hey, T. Higgins is our guy, we have to get creative. We have to, put him in motion and get him in a stack to where he's getting off of Christian Gonzalez or he's doing what, like, then all of a sudden he has these opportunities opened up for a big game and lots of targets. But I think we probably see like 11 to 13 targets. It's not all going to be on Christian Gonzalez, but Christian Gonzalez allowing like a sub 50% catch rate. I think only Quinyon Mitchell among qualified corners are allowing a lower catch rate than Christian Gonzalez. And then when they're not Christian Gonzalez on him, they're probably double teaming him, right? Because it's like Mitchell Tinsley and Andre Yoshivas as the other wideouts. And so you're not scared of those guys. So I do think that Higgins, like, I think Higgins is really interesting. The way I actually really like playing Higgins is if, like, earlier in the week, operating under the assumption that Gesicki would miss, was like Higgins plus Noah Fant, because then you're just saying, we know they have to throw the ball a lot, and I'm paying 10K and just like getting whatever points come from this passing attack. It's a little harder for me to pull the trigger on Higgins solo, but like Higgins on a roster with Patriots with a tight end, I actually really like that build, because you're just expressing confidence in the Patriots' ability to score points. the Bengals' need and willingness to throw the ball, and the fact that the targets will be there for somebody. But I do think I'll have some Higgins like away from those types of plays. It's hard for me to get comfortable with him because I think the chances of a blow up game are probably pretty low. He can get there. The chances of a bad game are also pretty low, right? He's probably getting like 16, 17, 18, 20 points. But I think that's like the range he's going to land in most often if we ran out the slate 100 times. He can have the blow up game though, so we got to think about him as well.
Yeah, he is interesting there specifically with that matchup. You mentioned stack confidence for Drake Maye. Is Diggs part of that for you? No,
although he did actually, I think it was 89% of routes last week, which that's been like, we've talked about that, right? It's like Diggs on a per route basis is one of the top wideouts in the league this year. He's just not running all the routes. To me, DJ Turner doesn't get the press of a Quinyon Mitchell or a Derek Stingley Jr. or Christian Gonzalez, but like he's growing into one of those types of corners. And if you're going to put him on somebody, it's going to be Diggs to some extent. I don't know how much that matters, but I do think that the price tag continues to be a little rich on Diggs compared to what our expectations are for him in this sort of spread the wealth offense. But I don't mind throwing Diggs onto a Maye stack. I just don't consider that like a high certainty piece. I think Hunter Henry is the highest certainty piece because of the way that teams attack the Bengals. I mean, the Bengals have given up 12 touchdowns to tight ends. Second most is 7, right? I mean, that's a huge gap. And I think they're first in yards allowed, first or second in yards allowed, first or second in targets, like first or second in catches allowed. So, I mean, first or second most. And then Henry's so cheap that even if he misses, if he puts up like 7 or 8 instead of 14 to 20, it doesn't kill you. So I kind of like a stack like that. But no, I think Diggs is very viable with Maye, but I don't feel high confidence in him.
Let's see. One guy we hit on a little bit with Youda, and Alex is getting excited about him here. What's your read on Luther Burden this week at 3,600?
Yeah, I don't mind a coach speak in terms of like dramatic jumps, right? I think everything's incremental. So when Ben Johnson's like, he's earned more opportunities, but he has obviously moved ahead of Olamide Zaccheaus in that offense. And yeah, he's one of these, I usually in my player grid have the cheap with upside option in the player grid, which is basically just saying like a lot of times in tournaments, especially large field tournaments, especially deeper into the season, where you need the guy who you have no confidence on his floor, but can get you 20 points, right? And he's just a cheap guy and he unlocks a lot for you. And I think Luther Burden falls into that category where I have no confidence in my certainty of the points I'm getting from him, but I do have confidence in the ceiling that's available. So I think he's a really sharp way to go. I would be biased toward him in larger field play or playing him on a roster that's otherwise kind of full of certainty. I prefer to get my savings in spots like last week. It was like, even if I don't get the big game for Michael, I didn't expect the big game for Michael Wilson and Greg Dortch. It was just like, these guys are getting me points as part of this big block of players. And now I know that I'm getting points here and I have salary to work with, right? So similar with Tyrod Taylor and those wideouts is like, as long as they deploy those wideouts the way that they did last week, the way I expect them to this week, then like we know we're getting 30 plus points from Tyrod plus 2 wideouts, or we're highly confident that we are 27, 28, 30 plus points. And then we have lots of salary flexibility. But if Burden does go for that 20 to 25 pointer, he does end up being like a difference maker on the slate. So I think you can keep him in mind from that perspective. I'd be biased toward him in larger field play, MME, but I think you make a case for him on smaller field rosters.
You mentioned some of the Jets guys. Anything else like sub 4K, or let's even include sub 5K if there's some other value wide receiver options you really like?
I don't think so. It's thin enough that early in the week, I put Mac Hollins onto a couple builds, just see what it would look like. So I think it's pretty thin down here. Jacoby Myers is definitely interesting. I think Darnell Mooney, like I did throw this together in the journal last night. A Kirk Cousins, Bijan Robinson, Darnell Mooney, Kyle Pitts stack, which is going to be in my beta section in the player grid, which is like, I'm not interested in this on tighter builds, but for large field play, I would absolutely have this mixed in because we know that Kirk Cousins doesn't look good anymore. We know that this offense has nothing to play for. And we know that this offense can't operate with Darnell Mooney as the alpha wide receiver. And it's like, what if we're wrong? We've been wrong so many times on the Falcons this year, right? I'm up like 14 and a half betting units, and I'm probably down like 5 units on Falcons games, right? Because it's like every week they throw something at us that we're just not expecting. And it shouldn't shock us if they're competent this week. It shouldn't shock us if Kirk Cousins looks better than people expect him to look this week, right? And they end up putting together a strong game. So I think Darnell Mooney at 4,800 profiles is one of these guys that Sunday night, everyone's like, oh, why didn't we think about Darnell Mooney? He was the alpha. I mean, last year we were like, by week 11, 12, it was like, why are people paying 6,400 for Drake London when they can pay 5,100 for Darnell Mooney? And it wasn't a question of who's more talented. We know Drake London's a more talented wideout, but it was like Kirk Cousins was so biased toward Darnell Mooney that he was almost the same number of targets, catches, yards, points per game as Drake London at a lower price tag and lower ownership. And now it's like Kirk Cousins is back. Darnell Mooney's the alpha. So I do think that Mooney is a guy we need to think about in terms of not certainty, but just like those what if questions. Sunday night, everyone's like, oh yeah, Darnell Mooney put up 25 points and nobody was even thinking about him. I could see that sub 5K as well.
Last one before we move on, because the Kool-Aid guy mentioned it. Slayton is in this week. Wan'Dale Robinson, like every week, projecting decently as well. Thoughts on Giants wide receivers here in comeback mode versus the Lions?
Yeah, you know what's funny? Last week I mentioned Wan'Dale. Obviously, he didn't do anything, but it was a roster that I built probably Thursday night, and it was like, oh, I don't like this roster because as soon as Wan'Dale was on, it was like, oh, I don't like it. Like I don't feel comfortable with it. And I kept keeping it in mind as one of my main rosters. Somebody else actually built it, and it finished third in the Game Changer. The exact Wan'Dale roster that I built. And because once you had those 4 Brissett plus the 3 pass catchers plus CMC plus JSN,
you could do basically anything.
Yeah, and you're pretty limited in like there's defense, and everybody kind of went Titans on that, and then there's 2 spots left. So it was like a weird where you had like a 7-player core that was the same, and you have 2 spots you're kind of messing around with. And then Wan'Dale did nothing, but it was like the way that the roster was constructed, it ended up actually doing even better than the rosters I put into play. The Slayton one I think is very interesting. Yeah, I think any wide receiver attached to Jameis, you can think about it, and because he's going to throw the ball, and he's going to have fun doing it. So yeah, Slayton hadn't really been on my radar because I've been this season, like I've very much simplified things this year in this mode, because again, this year it's just been single entry 3 max, smaller field single entry 3 max. So it's been very easy for me to click over to this mode of just massive high certainty on my rosters across the board, right? And it's worked because like I've had my highest rate of profitable weekends that I've had in a decade in GPPs because, and the drawback when people talk about their hit rate of just profitable weekends, like, yeah, but are you getting enough ceiling? But it's like, I am, you know what I mean? So I can assess my play and be like, oh yeah. And I'm constantly knocking down the door toward first place finishes. And it's just been from like, what offenses are going to score a lot of points? Where do I have the most directional certainty, and piling things up that way? So that kind of leaves a player like Slayton off of my core list because it's more like, what could happen here? Oh yeah, this could happen, right? At the same time, in terms of if you go down that path of what could happen, yeah, there's very clear scenarios that you can draw up where Slayton has a big game here. So I probably won't actually end up on the play myself because of the way that I've been constructing rosters, but I do think it's a very sharp play this week.
All right. Let's head over to the tight end position where Trey McBride remains the king. Like JM said earlier at 6,800, definitely still undervalued. You do get Brock Bowers on the slate, Tyler Warren, Travis Kelce, Ferguson, higher price tag than Kelce, but we've really seen his target shares drop of late. Thoughts on the high end? I know you like McBride.
Yeah, McBride, I think is tremendous. I think the clearest way for the Colts to win, it's funny to say the Colts are 8-2, Chiefs are 5-5. But the clearest way for the Colts to win is through Tyler Warren. So I think he's viable. You know, it's interesting. The Colts are interesting because we've seen the big games from Jonathan Taylor, but we haven't seen the tournament winners from anyone else. Alec Pierce finally put something together a couple weeks ago where it was like, ooh, at his price tag, that was really nice. But we haven't seen like the huge games, but it can come, right? Just because we haven't seen them doesn't mean they can't. I'm not going to be going there, but I do think Warren is a sharp play, right? Like I try to this season where I've kind of shifted my content consumption to like watching all the games, and then I listen to a bunch of different recaps and then a bunch of different previews. And so I get like different angles, but one of the angles that I've been leaning into this year is Chris Long's Greenlight podcast. Is you have like a group of former NFL players who are looking at things from that perspective. And they all were highlighting Tyler Warren as the way that the Colts should be using him in this spot. And it was yeah, that clicks. That makes sense, right? Of how the Colts should try to match him up against the Chiefs linebackers, and that should be one of the ways they're trying to win this game. So I think he's viable. He's not going to be on my pool, but I think he's a sharp way to go. To me, McBride and Kelce, McBride's obviously head and shoulders above the others. And then Kelce, as in the standard tight end scenario,
Yes.
I think Kelce's a really sharp way to go because I think the Chiefs are obviously going to continue to throw it. It's a great matchup for tight ends against the Colts, and Kelce's been a big part of things. And it's another week where, again, a lot of uncertainty at wide receiver, a lot of uncertainty at running back. I've been just slamming 2 tight end builds all season long. And it's another week where, to me, that looks like a way to go because, again, I think Hunter Henry is pretty high confidence for, we're what wideouts under 4K? I don't know, is there anyone we really feel great about? Hunter Henry averaging 9.1 points per game, which is way higher than any wideout under 4K. And then a great matchup. And we know that he's going to be involved and touchdown equities there. Mark Andrews obviously has the ceiling, and he's a very interesting play with Lamar Jackson, but you can justify him away from Lamar. And then you've got, like I said, the Bengals tight ends are just in a great spot where we don't have Jamar Chase soaking up 15 targets, and we know that they're going to have to throw the ball because you can't run against the Patriots, and the Bengals can't run the ball, and the Patriots are going to score points, and then you can't really throw to wide receivers all that much against the Patriots. So it just funnels targets toward Chase Brown and the tight ends. And so, I think that there's a lot of ways to go at tight end this week. You can go, I've built some Kelce plus McBride rosters. I've built some McBride plus 1 cheap guy. I've gone double cheap guy at tight end. So yeah, I think that tight ends actually pretty interesting and pretty wide open this week in terms of how you allocate your salary and feel pretty good about some of the upside that you're getting, regardless of or compared to whatever you're paying.
Is the Bauer salary just too prohibitive when you can just pay 800 more for McBride?
Yeah, I think for me it's he put up the 45 pointer, 46 pointer, right? Again against Jacksonville, who McBride's playing this week, but he put up this huge game, and so we know that that's within the range of outcomes. It's more how bad this offense has been, and then now you're playing the Browns, and so it's just harder to see how the offense does well enough for Bowers to put up a huge game. That game against Jacksonville, it was kind of one of the few times where it was we can see the Raiders maybe doing well here. And that week, Bowers was half of my tight end pool that week. And I think it's the only time that I've really been on Bowers outside of the maybe week 1, or weeks 1 and 2. And then he started being okay, Bowers' knee isn't right. And then he came back and I was well, this offense, yes, he came back and that first game was Jacksonville. But then it was well, this offense is so bad. I'm not playing him against Denver. The Dallas game was off the main slate. But against Cleveland, I guess it's just not a spot where I want to attack this defense. And if he hits, I always try to think about that, right? If he hits, then good for everybody who played him is how I look at that one. It's just not where my style of play takes me.
Yep. I'd say the only other 2 to hit on just based on ownership projections, Mark Andrews at 3,800 and Kyle Pitts at 4,300. Does the thesis for Mooney carry over to Pitts for you?
Yeah. I'm biased toward Andrews from a certainty perspective because we know that if Lamar's having the big game, the touchdowns are there. Andrews is probably a big part of it. I prefer Andrews on a Lamar build, but fine with, and I prefer him on a Lamar build primarily because I like Hunter Henry more. And I like the Bengals tight ends more from a certainty perspective. That statement might come back to bite me, but yeah, I think Andrews is very sharp. And I think Pitts, you're having to stretch your imagination to be maybe Pitts finally has a good game. And it's in a game where the Falcons look good with Cousins, who hasn't looked good, but I think he's viable. He's definitely below these other guys we've talked about, but I think that you can make the case for him.
All right, JM. I think it's time for us to build a lineup, and this is going to be fun. Normally, I get tipped off on what the block is going to be, but because we didn't talk pre-show, it's all going to be a surprise. So let's.
Going to be a surprise for me too, Pete. Let's see.
Hey, that's how it goes sometimes. All right, JM, what is this block that you have been pondering on the flight to Oklahoma earlier today? You said you couldn't sleep last night, I assume, because you were laying awake in bed trying to think about the perfect block for this show.
Actually, I was laying in bed just thinking about rosters, but I usually go to bed at 2 a.m. on the West Coast, and it was like we had to wake up at 4 a.m. West Coast time for our flight. So I'm laying in bed at 11 p.m. body clock time, trying to fall asleep, and I was like, this is not happening for me. Yes, I mean I have so many blocks this week. Let's crowdsource this. What do people want to see? Right? We can go with the Tyrod Taylor and the 2 cheap wideouts. We could go with Hunter Henry plus Ramondre Stevenson. We could go with, we've done Brissett plus McBride, another block that I like, but we can leave that one alone for this week. We could go to, I'll throw the other one out there is, I think that T. Higgins plus a Bengals tight end is a very interesting way to go. So I don't know. Anybody say anything, or Pete, you got any thoughts? Where do we want to go here on this one?
Let's do the Tyrod, because I want to see like how many of these.
It's so open. We could do anything we want.
Here.
Anything we want on here.
Yeah, let's do it. Looks like Imwald was on Tyrod plus 2 block plus Ramondre, and T is my guess. Pretty close there on some of those.
Yeah, and if we end up on Ramondre on top of this, then it's like, we might have 900 in salary left over with like JSN and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Yeah.
How about this for a tweak on it? Unless you don't want to do it. What if we include Breece Hall? We could drop off one of the wide receivers, or if you want to go the triple, but maybe like Tyrod, Breece, and one of the pass catchers.
Yeah. And I honestly, I'm trying to think. I think I'm biased towards still including both pass catchers.
Okay.
Because you're still telling this story of just comprehensively Tyrod having a good game. The Jets doing fine here. The Jets maybe scoring 3 touchdowns, right? They're still a plucky team. They're still out there playing hard. And so if we get those 3 touchdowns, well, we're accounting for all 3 of those touchdowns through Tyrod and Breece Hall. And hopefully we get, one from these wide receivers. And then you're looking at something like 7 for 110 and a touchdown, right? Which is pretty fantastic for 6,500. That also covers 2 spots on your roster and opens up a ton of salary for certainty in other spots on your build. And going to this thing of like 20 to 30 points, right? Where can we say we're getting 20 to 30 points? I think we can count this as 2. I don't know if I love it, Joey, but yeah, it's it's something. It does it gets the job done. We can really be optimistic and be like, dude, if Tyrod Taylor just puts up 22 points, right? But then you have to be like, does he actually put up 22 points? I don't know. But if he does, then this one ends up being a banger. So we can look at this and basically say like this covers 2 players worth of 20 to 30 points with upside above that, because we'd have to have a really horrible run out to not get 40 from this block of 4 players, and then what we're going to see with salary wise is we're totally free to, let's put in JSN right now. The only thing that's really going to restrict us is like, do we have enough spaces for all the people we want? We can put in McBride. I'm sitting farther away from my computer than normal, so it's hard for me to see the salary that's left. Let's go ahead and put in the Browns defense.
Yeah, I was going to say, if we put in defense, that will give us still 7,200 for running back 2 and a flex.
Yeah. And so then we can decide, like, we don't want to just go with like Emmanuel Wilson and then pay up at this last spot. I almost prefer we go, throw in Ramondre and let's just see what that does for this roster. We got time. We don't even, you've got a hard out, but we don't have to get out for you. No,
we
got too much in salary left. What's that?
Yeah, like we could probably, so Ramondre leaves you with a 9,200 player. Like if you did Gibbs, you still have 6,100 for a flex. I don't know if there's anything I do think there though.
I do think Gibbs and Jamo can be played together without Goff. I prefer not to do it, but where you're literally playing the Tyrod stack in order to just pack as much certainty as you can in other spots. And so I don't necessarily want to do this and then, throw in Gibbs and then let's go Devontae Smith. And then you've got what you have is like a ton of ceiling. You're not getting that and like an additional 20 to 30 point player in Devontae Smith in terms of certainty, but you are getting a player with that range of ceiling. And so, this is just like illustrative of what we can do with this block, basically we can fit, we've got Gibbs and why can I not see this? Did my eyes go away? We've got Gibbs, we've got JSN, we've got Trey McBride, and those are going to just be such unique combos for people who think that this is a low value slate. And the thing about when we say low value, most weeks there's going to be like somebody sub 5K who hits.
It's just that there's a bucket of like 30 guys who could possibly do it, and you're hoping to land on the one right guy, and you're probably not going to. So anytime we can turn the math in our favor on those lower cost pieces, it helps us so much, because it's like, well, just across these couple spots and this chunk of salary, I'm going to be getting the points. And that's why I like the cheap blocks when we can have them. But yeah, it's just, you can pack in these players that other people are just not going to have on a roster together, and just really like the look of your roster. And then you, instead of needing like a bunch of things to go right, you really kind of need one thing to go right here, which is Tyrod and the Jets having a good game. Now, it's not a high confidence thing to go right, but if they do it, like, we feel pretty good that JSN's at least going to have a strong game. We feel pretty good that that Gibbs is going to at least have a strong game, that McBride's at least going to have a strong game, and all of them have ceiling to be the player you had to have on this slate. We can't know in advance who's going to put up that score that you had to have. So just being like, okay, let's get the guys who can do that, is kind of one of the sharpest ways to build, honestly.
And then you could play with this too. Like we were talking about Amon-Ra versus JSN. You could go Amon-Ra there. You could pay up for Bijan here. And then you can even get up, this gets you up to like a Pickens, a Henderson, some interesting plays there. So there's lots of ways.
Yeah, and you can go down to the Saints defense and get up to T. Higgins on that roster. So yeah, I mean, the Saints are one of the defenses that, if we're going to go to the other side of the story with Cousins, where it's like, oh, his arm doesn't look right and it's a tough place to play and the Saints are favored, and how is this offense going to look without Drake London? I mean, well, all of a sudden the Saints defense, obviously we prefer the Browns, right? Because the only risk with the Browns is, they don't get the sacks because the Raiders aren't dropping back enough, but you can't run the ball against the Browns. And I think that the Browns can do enough against the Raiders to, bring this defense into play. But if they don't have the big game, like, the Saints are certainly a team that can keep pace with some of these other defenses this week. And so, yeah, I mean, there's so much that you can do once you start with Tyrod and one of these pass catchers. But if you also say, well, we increase certainty by just throwing both guys on here, that opens things up even more for us.
So here it is for the audio listeners. Obviously, some ways to mess around with this, but we went with the Tyrod Taylor vomit stack, including Breece Hall, Adonai Mitchell, John Mechie, and then that freed up salary for Gibbs, for JSN, for McBride, for Devonta Smith, and Browns there. Talk about being able to get 4 guys in there who can go for 30 plus. It certainly accomplishes that. JM, anything people should know about 1 week season this week? Yeah,
we waited until the very end, didn't we? Bad on us. It's funny because I was like, I want to make sure I'm on the show today because we started Black Friday stuff and then we forgot to bring it up until till the end of the show. But yeah, Black Friday deals, $19 Bink Machine rest of the season. So one of the things that I keep bringing up, if you're a single entry 3-max player, hand builder, so $19, if you play playoff DFS, that's $1.75 a week. So if you haven't used an optimizer before, $1.75 a week. The main thing is, like, we want to give you guys a chance to use an optimizer and see how valuable it can be for hand build. So, like, for instance, last week I was able to put Brissett, McBride, like just lock Brissett, McBride, Wilson, and Dortch onto a roster and then run the optimizer and just see like 200 different combinations of what was possible and what you could put onto that roster, and workshop ideas, shop through rosters and see if there's anything that you really like. And then, I did that with 5 or 6 different stacks last week and just see, okay, what's being spit out for these. And I can kind of multiply my time and the power of my time by doing that. So Bink Machine's $19. Obviously, these deals will end at the end of Thanksgiving week. And then it's 80% off for an Inner Circle subscription. So that'll end next week as well. But that's like $46 for rest of season Inner Circle. So yeah, if you, again, as we always say, the site's not for everybody. The Bink Machine's for everybody, but the site's not for everybody, because if you listen to this and you're like, yeah, whatever. Like I listen to JM for some of his thoughts on players. He's a small piece of my content consumption, and I like some of the stuff he says. I dislike some of the other stuff he says. That's whatever, right? But the main thing about the site is, like, we're really focused on roster construction and how we think through the strategy of DFS and the strategy of each slate, in addition to focusing on players. And that's really, I think, the main value add that we bring, but it's not what everybody's looking for. So as we always say, check out the site. You'll know pretty quickly if it's not for you. And if you do a subscription and it's not for you, just shoot us an email. We'll send you a refund. If it is for you, it's probably all the way for you because it's different from what other sites provide. And so, yeah, come hang out with us. You've been hanging out on the show. Come hang out with us. And also check out the Bink Machine, because just getting that optimizer, just that extra like muscle being built up of like being able to build all these rosters and kind of shop through them and compare and contrast things, I think is really valuable.
And we didn't get to touch base beforehand. Are you good for next week, Friday, normal time?
I am. Yeah, I will be. I'll be normal time.
Perfect.
Normal day will be, I'm sure, kind of quickly getting our feet under us for a slate that we always kind of get a late start on getting ready for. But I will be on board for everything as normal next week.
Perfect. So next week, show at the normal time, jam at 1 Eastern, and then we're going to have Ship My Money filling in for Youda for the Bully the Sims block. Appreciate everybody hanging out in the chat. I'm going to run over to do Off and On the Clock with the Badge Bros. Same idea is this, but breaking down the underdog slate for week 12. Lots of interesting dynamics to deal with swaps potentially and all these running backs. So we will talk through all of that. If you're watching here, you should get redirected automatically, or you can just refresh and head to my YouTube page and you will see that show there. Be sure to take advantage of all of the Black Friday deals here at 1 Week Season over at Run the Sims. You got that 50% off first payment promo running, and good luck this weekend if I don't see you. And I got a couple of shows this weekend if you guys are YouTube members. Mike Leone going to be my guest Saturday night on After Dark, and then I'll have my cram, of course, Sunday morning. Feels like we might have some fun news to sift through, so we shall see. For JM, for Youda, I'm Pete. We'll see you guys next time on Block.